Let's look at this report now that suggests that the use of coal-fired power as a percentage of the energy market actually increased over the first quarter of the year. I'm joined by the Director of Energy Research at the Centre for Independent Studies, Aidan Morrison. Aidan, what did you make of this development? I think it was the first time in 7 years that emissions actually went up as part of the electricity sector in our country. Is that right? The first time in 7 years?
Yes, I think that is right. It shows there's two things going on here. There is a bit of an increase in demand that's occurred, and that's because we had a somewhat warm summer, and also the population has surged. A lot of people returning from overseas students, for example, coming back to Australia. So there's a little bit higher demand, but also it shows that the energy transition to try to rush in a whole bunch of renewable energy generators to our system is just slowing down. It's grinding to a halt. There's still a few being installed, but in the last couple of years, that has simply just declined and declined, and we're not making the progress that I think the government expected to see, and we're not on track currently to meet the target. So this is the first example of that slowing down and stalling of the transition really showing its head here.
Yeah, so in 2022, from memory, there was $6.5 billion investment in utility-scale renewables. Last year, it was less than $2 billion. So from 6.5 to 2, that's quite a drop-off. Why are we seeing that when it comes to renewables? Is it the transmission question, the fact that people are kicking up a stink in areas they don't want transmission lines through their regions, their farms?
Yes, that's part of it. Yeah, certainly the nature of renewables is that they all tend to generate at the same time. When it's sunny, it's very sunny, and all the different solar farms all produce at the same time. And that puts enormous pressure on transmission because they have to have enough to take all that excess of solar away from the generators and get it to the cities. So it is a particular choke point, a constraint. And we've reached the point now where it doesn't look viable to invest with the current grid. They have to upgrade and invest in a whole lot more. So that's part of it. The other thing is the government is also developing new subsidy schemes, such as the Capacity Investment Scheme. Now, this was a scheme that was meant to be just supporting investment in batteries initially to try to provide that firming power for when the sun wasn't shining and the wind wasn't blowing. That's been massively expanded now so that that will be available to other generators, wind and solar investors, to use that scheme as well to get an additional subsidy. And it seems that many investors are probably wanting to hold back a little bit and wait until that scheme is online and they can get the subsidies to support their investments. So it seems like there's a bit of a chicken egg going on here where the government's own actions to try to roll out more subsidies to push these into the systems temporarily perhaps has led to a bit of a withholding of capacity as investors wait for that new flush amount of cash to come and support the investments.
So from what you're saying, is it going to take a lot longer to get to those targets of the government set 82% renewables by 2030? Is it going to take longer? How do you see gas feeding into that as a peaking supply of energy? But also, one of the reasons coal is being shut down, it's not just the fact that governments have changed their approach. These things are old, aren't they? They're past their use-by date in many respects.
Look, there's a few things going on there. I'll just start with maybe the first question. The question about gas, what's its role? I think that gas can play a role in peaking power plants as renewables are rolled in the system, but that requires still additional investment, and those gas plants are expected to not be working all the time, so it's difficult to incentivise them to come into the grid. The question of coal, though, that's a really mixed bag. It's been commonly said that our coal power stations are sort of old and falling apart and no longer reliable. I think it's over-exaggerated. The reality is that our fleet's got a very mixed kind of demographic. Plenty of coal plants actually have a long time to live, and if they were to live to their sort of natural and expected lives, some of those would still be going in the late 2040s up to around 2050. So it's not consistently the case that actually they're falling apart and urgently need to be replaced. The logical thing to do to maintain reliable supply would be to keep them running. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for them to run most economically and efficiently when they're having to ramp up and down around the big amounts of energy that are surging into the grid from time to time from renewables when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. So that makes it complicated operations to keep the coal running efficiently in the country, but still it has the capacity to provide reliable, firm power for us for some time to come.
Director of Energy Research at the Centre for Independent Studies, Aidan Morrison. Appreciate your time. Thanks.